Hey folks, Steve here with another Nations in Arms video. We continue the War of the First Coalition now into 1794. Now there's a few things I need to do that I should have done at the end of last video that I forgot, but we'll cover that all regarding Poland, which is really more for flavor than anything at this point, since Poland is not involved in the War of the First Coalition. But let's talk very briefly about what we have seen occur in the last turn, or the last couple of turns even. Successful French campaigns in northern Spain caused the total dropping of Spain from the coalition. So the way that that had worked was if there were no Spanish units in France, there's a +1 to a die roll. And then for each fortress controlled, there was another one. We basically made it so that anything other than a 1 on the die roll in the diplomacy phase of this spring 1794, Spain would leave the war. And I decided I didn't want to do a bunch of production and waste my time before rolling those dice, because technically production comes before that. So we rolled the die anyway, and we got a 2, which was actually just enough to have Spain peace out. So almost a 1. A 1, Spain would have kept going, though at a nasty disadvantage. Instead, Spain is out. We did a similar roll for Prussia. Prussia only had a +1 of the die roll because there were no Prussian units in France, but amazingly, I rolled a 5, and Prussia left the war. Now, historically, Spain and Prussia both were kind of out of the war much earlier than everybody else, but I think Prussia leaving this early, I think they would have probably had another year at it before piecing out historically, but the French are lucky, or maybe it's both would have. I can't remember. I have to go look at the timeline of the War of the First Coalition. Point is, Spain and Prussia are likely to leave at some point. It just happened that here, luck on the side of the French, they have both left. Really, just as a theme of this whole playthrough, the French have enjoyed the better half of luck in this game, which is kind of, especially in some very important battles, that has shifted the trajectory of the game very hard in the French favor. It could have gone another way, honestly, and if it had, in a couple of crucial battles, we could maybe be looking at the end of France. So I don't know. The tension is high. That's a good thing. And I'm beginning to play better as each side and better understanding how best to use maneuver. We covered that in the intermission strategy video. But it's kind of late now for the coalition to be making best use of those lessons learned. But the war is not over yet, and there's still plenty more to do. I suspect the best that the coalition can do is maybe achieve a draw by keeping the French out of northern Italy. So Austria is still seeking to maintain its control of much of Germany and Italy, or its influence, its sphere of influence over those areas. And Britain can still provide a huge amount of gifts and financing to Austria, even though Prussia and Spain are out. That just means more money can go into Austrian coffers, and Austria can build out robust armies to contest the French. So it's certainly not the true end of the game. It just means that an outright victory for the coalition is looking a lot less likely. But we'll see. So a couple of things then I want to get out of the way. First, I should have covered the changes in Poland. So you can see here, this is everywhere there's a pink disc is representing the rough control of the Polish-Lithuanian state during this time, or towards the end of 1793, before the next partition occurs. I've tried to put discs on forts, but you could, like, if you're, your kids play connect the dots, right? You'd go, and that's what Poland controls. Well, at the end of the winter 1793, which we just finished, there is a partition. Again, this is almost purely for flavor, but I like flavor. Give me the flavor, guys. Give me that weird chrome that doesn't matter. I like it. So this is the first partition is executed. Russia annexes Polesia and Podolia. So Podolia, Polesia, however that's chosen to be pronounced. I don't need to put other colored discs because it's just Russian national territory by every other measure of the game. And so those areas are now controlled by Russia. Then we also have Prussia annexing Posen, which amusingly doesn't actually have the black outline for Prussia there. So we're going to remove the control marker that I have, and I'm going to add the black one there. So technically, Prussia now has a border that runs here. Now, Prussia's out of the war, so it kind of doesn't matter, but it is part of the historical narrative. So, yeah, Prussia has annexed Posen. You can kind of look at it, hey, we got our asses kicked in France, real bad, but we got other stuff going on. France, go have your revolution. We're going to take control of some of Poland. And then finally, Austria annexes Eastern Galicia, which is right here, which I have 3 markers just covering each of these fortresses, but this is territory that is within the gray outline of Austria there. So as you can see, Poland just got much smaller, and at the end of 1795, which won't be for a while, Poland disappears from the map because Russia will annex Lithuania. I think I had something wrong here. Oh, okay, that was part of Galicia. My bad. I had those extra markers out there to help with the visibility. That is my mistake. So then at the end of 1795, these 3 markers will be these 4 markers will be removed for Russia annexing Lithuania, and then let's see, what is it? Austria will grab Galicia, the rest of Galicia, Western Galicia, however you want to. I'm not even sure that's how it's pronounced, but if I'm getting it wrong, my bad, guys. And Prussia will get Masovia. So this being this marker and this marker. So yeah, there's one more partition of Poland, but as you can see, Poland just got much smaller. Again, will not have any direct game effect, but again, purely for historical interest, we see Poland and Lithuania as being annexed off in Eastern Europe, being partitioned, unfortunately for them. Okay, getting back to the main action, I have already done the card stuff. So we added the 1794 cards to the deck, shuffled those up, and we drew cards. France gets an additional card for control of Flanders. So they were able to get 3 cards. And then, I'm pretty sure it was 3 cards now. I have to remember. Let's see, yeah, 2 plus 1 for Flanders, and that was it. And then the extra one that we get to pick, I still consider this to be a pick the card they want via Committee of Public Safety. And then Britain draws 2, and then they get an extra one for Austria. Actually, come to think of it, because Spain and Prussia hadn't left yet, Britain gets another 2 cards. Oh, except Spain. Okay, never mind. They get 1 extra card. So I'll add that to their pile. And so this is what the cards turn out to be. So we still have the Corsairs card, which we're going to end up playing during production. We pulled, this is the French hand, by the way, Soldiers of Fortune, so they can get Gemini. They've got Home Sweet Home, so we can immediately end a foreign war. Not sure that's going to be important. We got Free Passage, that could maybe help in Germany. And then the one that we picked was Carnot. So each French corps is now permanently given a +1 combat modifier. The French player immediately deploys 2 of his army counters, 1 engineer unit, and 2 supply wagons free of cost on the map. Important card to get. Now imagine for a second if you were playing with Bjorn's rules and it's completely up to chance you know, the French players just hoping beyond hope to get Carnot, but the longer time goes on, the less chance they'll ever see this card ever be played because the deck gets bigger over time. That's why I don't mind the Committee of Public Safety is a very powerful card, but we also have Terror, and I mean, in this game, the French haven't had to worry about the Terror because they've been winning pretty much every battle they've had to fight recently. Um, but it seems right for the narrative that we're trying to portray in this scenario. The coalition just got blockade running, so maybe not super useful for them. They still have winter campaign. They have fear of the sound of guns, so this could help avoid a combined battle. They got hussars, so could be useful. And then they drew directory, which I don't. They're going to have to play it because it's a public card. This is representing the change of the revolution government. Again, very interesting. If you want to know the history, you can go look into that. But the directory was kind of a way to temper the zeal of the revolution because there were still conservative elements in the French government. And so you just kind of had like this reorganization into the directory. But ultimately, the directory was not strong enough, and you would eventually have the events of Vendémiaire, which is also a card in the game, but is a bit later yet. So this is going to happen. So it's kind of playing out okay, where the coalition is going to have to play that. It's going to mean that the Committee of Public Safety and Terror are done. So we don't have to worry about Terror, but we're not going to get to pick cards anymore. But we got just the right number of cards where the French army now has combat modifiers, which balances out a few things for them. Now, we haven't played those cards yet, but we're about to. So those are kind of the key elements here. So we've got the cards, so now we're going to play those cards. Again, the order almost doesn't even really matter at this point. So the French are going to play theirs. So they're going to play Carnot. So we play that. We're going to get our free army counters, engineers, and supply wagons. I'll worry about getting that set up here in just a moment. And then the coalition player has no choice. There are no other public events to be played. They have to play the one that they have. So they will play the directory. So we now know the directory is the government of France at the moment, or in charge of France. So these cards are done. And it is like, again, this is representing a different stage of the revolutionary period. We're now beyond the Committee of Public Safety. We are in the directory period as the French government continues to evolve into what will eventually become a consulship of Napoleon Bonaparte. But that's still a little ways away yet. Still a ways away. Okay, so the event cards have been played. Now we're going to do the economics and budget. And just as a reminder from the last video, because Spain was pretty much a lost cause, Britain would not have given any money to Spain, but they probably would have given some money to Prussia. But it's like, would they have given as much or more than last time? Well, we don't really know. So I'm just going to say that we're going to have I think 10 or 12 production gifted to Prussia, because again, the economic production phase occurs before diplomacy, which is when you would do those die rolls that we did last time. I just wanted to get it out of the way so I didn't have to do extra paperwork for nothing. But we still would have, if we thought Prussia had a good chance to stay in the game, Britain would have given them money. So we'll subtract some amount of money from the British Treasury, similar to what we spent last spring to support Prussia, and that will just be money lost, I guess, in the turn order. I do think, if I were to house rule this, I feel like those die rolls should be during the winter at the very end of 1793, not the beginning or the diplomacy of 1794. But I don't know. The designer must have had, some thought process on that. Maybe for just this reason that, Prussia is going to live off the British gravy train a little bit, and Britain's going to be pissed. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go and take care of the economics for the powers still in play, which are Britain, Austria, and France, and all their allies and all that goodness. And I'll just take care of all of that, the placement of new units, the placement of the Carnot event card, all of that kind of stuff. I'll do all of that off camera, and when we come back, we'll be ready to start playing the activations phase of 1794. Okay, I have completed the production and deployment phases for the three sides or three, power spheres that still exist in the game at this point: France, Austria, and Britain. What's interesting is how much, is still against France in just in terms of the economic stuff, because Britain still gets a ton of money and can basically give a huge amount to Austria. If they wanted to, they could have Austria have double production because they can just give them so much money. Because Britain still gets a lot of trade, and that becomes just a huge dump of money, and they can send it to Austria. They can just do that. And Austria can use that money to rebuild, up to their strength point limit, right? We still have force pool or strength point build limits that are the real constraint on the size of each power's army, but the extra money can be used to rebuild army markers, create depots, do other important things. And so it still feels like, from the French perspective, that they're facing quite a lot. Like, it still feels that way. I mean, you figure we destroyed almost every coalition force that came our way in the 1793 turn, but everyone's rebuilding, and again, the coalition has a tremendous production advantage over the French. I just want to kind of show some of the Corsairs. I should talk about that quickly. The British cleared the Corsairs and destroyed them, found them and destroyed them this time, which is different from the action we saw last year, which they couldn't even find the Corsairs. Well, this time they did, and they did successfully destroy all of them. You can start to see the new forces of the Austrians. So in this case, this is a 8 strength point stack. This is uh, I guess that's an 8 strength point stack too. And then, because this is our Army of the Rhine, Keshen's force, they can only get a couple steps outside home territory to replenish. But locally, there are some HRE miners, Baden, Württemberg, Bavaria, that got some units. So he's going to be able to swoop these guys up and have a much stronger force. And really, even the forces that are arrayed down here. So the two new armies are commanded by Wormser and Coburg. We could be up to like 10 points, 10 strength point stack or more, depending on where they go, who they pick up, and everything else there. Um, by comparison, the French forces, I mean, it's not nothing. So the North Army that is operating in Flanders only has 4 steps right now. After some replenishment, you can get up to 2 steps. Then we have the Army of Germany, which is a new army that we've placed here in Orleans, uh, and has, 5 steps, but he's going to be able to pick up some nearby units. He'll get a few more. We have I'm sorry, the Army of the North is here with 4 steps. This army is the Army of Italy, which I've kind of shuffled some things around just for mnemonic purposes. So Dumouriez has the Army of Italy, so he's got 4 steps at the border of Piedmont. And then we have our Spanish army with just 4 steps here, but he's going to support Custine, who's still out there with a few 3 steps. I think he's got. We've got Luckner as an auxiliary force with 2 steps. We actually played our mercenary leader card to get Jomini, and he has that core there. So you can kind of see how that's playing out. Britain has created a new peninsular army, and then they have Abercrombie with the Anglo Dutch army. This army is really just going to be used to uh, be a home defense and maybe an auxiliary reinforcement stack. But we have York here in command of the Peninsular Army, which has cuirassiers, infantry, and guards. And so that's a potent 6-step stack. They are likely going to navally move into Holland and support the stack of Dutch units there, and basically have a very dangerous stack entering into Flanders, which is still a very important area. Alternatively, we could send them down here into the Vendée. So that's kind of an option for the British, and for that reason, the British have decided that the coalition naval 2 marker will go in spring this time. Basically, one season out of the year, you can put your additional naval marker in addition to the basic naval marker that you get. The British want to make sure they have enough naval activations to do everything that they might want to do, but it's going to be tricky there. Yeah, so basically, each side has spent out its force, its money. Britain has a little bit left over. They gave a huge amount, like 32 to Austria. They lost 12 to Prussia, and then Prussia left. But next turn, they'll be able to give even more money to Austria if they want to. So yeah, there is a ceiling. Like, so much money only gets you so far because you can only build so much stuff, and only so much stuff is going to be actually valuable to you. But it still shakes out for an interesting year. France is still a disadvantage, and they're going to be disadvantaged, production-wise the whole rest of the game. So it's really going to come down to, quality and leaders. And so the general strategy for the French this year are going to be, we're going to actually send Jourdan, who commands the army of Germany, west, supported by Jomini and potentially by Luckner, to come into the Vendée and eliminate these guys once and for all, and secure the West a little bit. That will enable us to then focus on sending him east. But what we're going to do is a little bit of a counterclockwise spin with our French army. So we're going to send Dumouriez. He's going to pick up these cuirassiers and head north to kind of guard this area. Again, we're going to send these guys over here. I guess Luckner is going to go clockwise, or maybe we're going to have him go with the army of Spain. I'll have to decide that, I guess, but very likely going to have some convergence here. These guys are going to head north, and then the army of Spain is going to kind of take over this position, with Custine operating to finish up the siege of Toulon, rather. Knowing, and of course now we've got one of the Austrian armies over here that's going to come, so there's going to be some fighting in northern Italy for sure. Wurmser is probably going to want to support Teschen, so that Teschen can focus on moving this way. Wurmser can again head this way, but there should be some French force contesting them. The only problem could be that our Army of the North might have to deal with both a British army that's potent and Teschen's force, which will be potent, which could prove to be a big challenge for them. So yeah, kind of an interesting setup. We can say that the French are doing good, but man, every time it's just like they're going to be disadvantaged on units. It feels like, and at least now they have their combat modifier, and they can continue to try to leverage maneuver warfare to their advantage as best they can. The French have pretty good leaders across the board, and they have plentiful leaders still. So maybe they can get the Austrians caught in a situation where the Austrians are running out of leaders. The British don't have very many leaders either, so maybe we just have to focus on those advantages. So we're really already at the initiative phase, or the activations phase, because I took care of production. The cards have been played. The French did use their Corsairs card, but it didn't help them because the British rolled well. They used their Soldier of Fortune card to get Jomini on as just an additional leader to help. And that's it. I think we're ready to go. So we've got all our chits in the cup. Again, this is a turn where, because it's spring, we're going to have basically the winter quarters chit pulled 3 times before the turn is ended. So we're likely going to go most of the way to the end, just depending on when we get that winter quarters chit across the turns. But yeah, so that's enough of the basic review of what the strategic situation is after production. We'll start rolling here as the next step. All right, so we're going to get chit pulling here for the spring of 1794, and we'll see what happens. First chit out of the cup is Coalition Land 3. So Coalition will be off to a good start. 3 is a pretty good pull here because, as we've talked about, many of the leaders on the board are 3 activations. So pretty much everybody who really wants to go probably can go. So we'll do it up, and then we'll show the aftermath. This will be the point here, guys, where I'm really not going to show much of the moment to moment gameplay. The views tend to drop off heavily here, and for excuse me, for me, I just want to kind of get through by playing the game and having fun playing the game and kind of showing you guys the aftermath. I don't feel the need to explain every little thing along the way, so we'll show the aftermath of this Coalition Land 3 activation in just a sec. All right, this is a pretty quick activation because there's not much I wanted to do. I want to leave Coley here. I want to leave Latour here to hold. We do have our army, Australian, Jesus, guys. You would think, because I'm a pretty, I'm a knowledgeable guy, play war games from a lot of different eras, that I would never say Australian when I mean Austrian, but your mind plays tricks on you, doesn't it? The Austrian Army of Italy. Probably because there's L's in there. I'm getting all screwed up. Is moving with a baggage train and is slowly working its way across northern Italy. We'll probably want to pick up that detachment when it can along the way. The other armies, we had our Army of Bohemia move up into a position here, and Teschen actually retreated back to start picking up some of these other units, and so he's used up some of his activation just moving and picking guys up so that he is stronger. And what he'll do on his second activation, Teschen he'll pick up the Württemberg unit and then swing back up this way. So we have an army going this way, this guy moving up. We're going to eventually have the British army coming through here, but we can't do it yet. We need a naval marker to show up. We do have 2 coalition naval markers in the cup, hoping to get something good. And that's all that we did. That's all that we did. There's nothing else right now that does the coalition any good with activations, so it's a simple thing. So now we're going to go to the cup and see what else we get. And we get, okay, Coalition Land 1, we can't play that, so we'll set it aside for a moment. And then we get Neutral Land. Okay, well, Neutral Land is easy peasy. Nothing happens there, and we'll pull. Okay, Coalition Land 2. Can't play that either. Okay. Neutral Naval. Okay. Did I forget to put the French chits in the cup? No, I didn't forget. They're in here. Okay, Empire Land 1, which is the chit that allows all French stacks to activate. We'll see what the French can do with that. They can move everything, right? So they probably will move everything that they reasonably can or feel like they should, which should be a pretty strong activation for them to get operating. Hopefully we'll see the Vendée rebels push back and that counterclockwise sort of shift that I mentioned before we'll probably have accomplished that. Okay, here we are after the French activations. It's generally gone well. Though I do fear for being overextended with the Austrian armies coming. So we have the German army move over here, defeat and eliminate the Vendée rebels here. We had, who was it? Luckner run up here, and he stopped. That's as far as he could go, but that allowed Jumini to come down here. And basically, because there's a Zoc, a zone of influence from this army, and then they came through here, and then there was an enemy unit here. There was a fight that resulted in a retreat for the Vendée unit, but it had nowhere to retreat to and was eliminated. And so the Vendée rebels are eliminated, and French are feeling pretty good about that. Then, in terms of the counterclockwise rotation, uh, well, Custine captured Toulon again, so that's sort of a safe situation. And now can start looking at Nice. We did have Hochard run up here, use some extended movement, getting into place. Um, really just replacing where he can't be adjacent to an enemy, so I guess he's got to be here. That's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 extended movement, and his attrition roll is fine. So he is replacing Demurrier's spot, right? So this is a potent force. What we really want to do is send him down and then start pushing, through these passes here in northern Italy to contest it. Demurrier's moved up to be near Metz and Lorraine as sort of a central position. And then we had our northern army, instead of trying to chase the Austrians who are way down here, moved to attack the Dutch in Holland. Now, the Dutch leader there, this orangish red counter, did evade away and chose not to fight because it likely would have gotten its butt beat. The French did capture the capital in Amsterdam, and so has captured the province, because I believe that is the only only one. It does put these guys in a bit of a supply predicament a little bit. And I'm going to have to look. I think they're out of supply now. Even if they trace to an allied place like Hanover, they've still got to go somewhere or to a major power. And even then, there's just some limitations on supply. So I think it's very possible those Dutch units are now out of supply, which would make them even easier to prey upon in the forthcoming activities. So kind of a tricky thing. They could try to maneuver around and do something tricky. I'm not sure how that would go. So French doing well in aggregated forces, but time will tell how long they can last. I think the fact they've managed to more or less push the enemy out of France, all except for a little bit of poking around in the Alps here, feels pretty good for them. If they can hold this through the year, they're not going to have any more negatives to their production and should be feeling pretty good with that. All right, so going to the next chit, it will have to be a coalition land chit for land stuff, or we could get the naval stuff. So we'll see. Oh, we got our first winter quarters. So that's the first time we have winter quarters, but we'll still have to pull it 2 more times. We're going to set it aside. We're going to pull a chit from the cup before putting it back into the cup. And we get Coalition Land 2, and that is a playable chit. So we'll put winter quarters back, and we'll take care of this. Now, this will enable the Naples stack, Neapolitan stack that's way down here to activate. They had to be rebuilt from scratch in Naples, so they could start working their way up. They'll be kind of slow going. We could also see Abercrombie move around a little bit, which they might do. And then because it's a 2, again, that means that any leader with a 2 or higher can activate, including some of these other forces that have activated once already, which means that we could see these Austrian big stacks continue their march to engage the French. They probably won't get close enough to actually engage in any combats this activation, which means several of them will be done for the season, but at least gives them an opportunity to kind of get in decent shape for the next set of campaigns. Also may mean that the Dutch can do something. I'm going to have to double check their supply situation, but that's going to be important for them. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, here we are after the activations. The British up here did this action where they kind of swung around, picked up units, dropped off units, and circled back around just so we could get York with a depot, and then we had the Dutch pull back, so they actually went to this fortress in Wessel, where some of the steps can be in supply with the fort. They decided to pull back there and have avoided any major attrition. So it's definitely a problem. Holland has to do something because they'll be conquered at the end of the year. But and it's kind of weird in this game. You check for being conquered major powers every season. For minor powers, only after the winter season. So if you want to conquer a minor country, like whenever you manage to be militarily in control of it, you have to hold it to the end of the year. So France has to continue to maintain control of Holland through winter, and then they will, have conquered that territory. Now, unfortunately, there's no mechanism to set up the uh, Batavian Republic that's sort of handled out of scenario technically. So it'll be like France, will have conquered somehow Holland, I guess, or something. I'm still not 100% sure I understand it. It might be that, France has to militarily control it the rest of the game and they don't get to conquer it, which kind of alleviates some of the sort of garrison duty action. So they decided to pull back. They weren't going to be any threat because outside of this hex, they're out of supply functionally, I believe. So at least I think so. I mean, I'm trying to look at the supply rules and just get an understanding how a minor of a different major power, is that a supply source? And I don't think so. Yeah. So it's a little bit of funkiness because Holland is not allied to Austria, but it can hang out in Austrian territory as an allied unit, I think. Um, but it can't draw supply, like can't draw a supply path through their territory. They can kind of use some of the provisions at the fort, it seems like, but because Holland is allied to Britain, they really need a supply line to Britain, which was going to be available to them if the British uh, naval chit had come up. We were going to be situated to have the British Army land in Amsterdam and form a pretty dangerous opponent for the French. So, as it stands, that's all done. The other Austrian armies have moved forward slowly. This guy's activation is over, Wormser, but he is sitting on top of Strasbourg and will siege it on his, I guess, the next season because his activation is done, and more slow movement in other places. So nothing too crazy, um, nothing too crazy. But I do think, uh, it's a slow plodding journey to face the French at this point. And we'll see what happens. They're slowed down because they're taking supply wagons with them. Now I could try to abandon them and move faster, but I do want those. I do want the wagons with them because that's going to enable them to project more supply where they're going to be going, and I'd rather be able to do that. Um, because without it, I don't know. It's such a tough decision, guys. But I feel like they should be taking the baggage trains with them, just so they can operate a little bit better in terms of where they're going, what they're doing, where are they going to uh, be able to maintain a presence. Because what I think is going to end up happening is they're gonna face the French, or they're gonna get near the French, and all we're really gonna have is, you know future turns when actual combat will occur, and we just want to be in decent shape no matter what happens, so they can't easily be cut out of supply. So I don't know. Caution versus being bold. It's a tough one. All right, so we'll go back to the cup and we'll see what we get. And we get Coalition Naval, which is kind of not the best time to have gotten this, but so here's the thing. Here's what we could do. What I was thinking about was have these boats come 1, 2, pick these guys up, and then basically go somewhere and land the big, strong English army somewhere, British army, and kind of open up a new front. But there's not too many places that seem really great for this. Um, Maybe the exception being, we could pop in a Le Havre and maybe start making plays down here. What we would have wanted to do was land in Amsterdam in the north and basically add these Dutch to the stack and have it be a pretty scary stack that could come down here. But now they don't have a good place to go. And I believe uh, that they have to go. Okay, so a naval invasion cannot take place in a hex without either a harbor, a city, or an island, which is kind of interesting. What does that even mean, or an island? What counts as just an island without having a port or a city? Um, are there any places that are ports or an island without a port? Probably somewhere on the map that I can't see. So they can't just like the British can't just invade like this hex arbitrarily. Like it has to be, one of these ports. Alternatively, they could come down to. I guess that's a good question. Is there a coastal hex that doesn't have a port but has a city? I don't think so. I could be missing someplace. Or no, aha. They could come down into Rotterdam and cut the French supply line. Would that work? The only problem is they're going to be out of supply themselves. And the reason why I say that is, okay, so the way the overseas supply works, as best as I can tell, is that for the British to be in supply, they're gonna ultimately trace back to a home port like Bristol, Plymouth, wherever. Assuming you're not using the cliffs of Dover, in which case I'm kind of set up to make use of that whenever it matters. But what you need to do is you're going to land at a harbor. Let's just say it is Le Havre. And then when you land, what you're going to do is you're going to plop down. Whoops, that's not the right unit. But here it is. You're going to plop down a depot. And then that depot acts as a supply link across sea zones to a home supply source. But the depot has to be in a port that can connect back some sea areas back home. And then this is your main supply link. So from here, you'd have to, drop off detachments or take more forts to go wherever it is that you want to go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe you'd come down to Orleans, or you'd pop into Paris with a detachment or something. Who knows? But you got to have a depot in a port. So could have the British drop into Rotterdam, maybe try to fight the French force and cut off a supply line, but then they're going to be out of supply until they take either Antwerp or somewhere else. And the thing is that the French army can simply use their engineer to cross the river and then be back in supply. So I'm not sure Rotterdam makes sense. I wanted it to be Amsterdam and to have them safely just be transported in a harbor, join the Dutch, and then have a really potent army. But that's not going to work. And I don't think going to Rotterdam is going to be the right move. So we can definitely create a distraction by going into Le Havre, but then these guys are going to have the ability to respond and respond without too much difficulty even. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and then they're in a central position. So what do we do? Where can we go that's going to cause grief and be a problem? Well, we could go down like to here, and I'm not sure, like this port Like, what hex is the port actually in? Is it in Bordeaux? I'm not sure how that's supposed to work because it doesn't quite look right there. So I don't know, guys. I'm gonna think about this, and when we come back, we'll show the aftermath. I think there are other coalition fleets who will be moving around as well, so it's a good opportunity to try a couple of weird things out. Okay, here we are after the British naval, and we did a couple of things. One, the Portuguese landed in Corsica and took Ellis. Oh boy, I'm not gonna try to pronounce that. Sorry, guys, not even gonna try. Yeah, Portuguese came in. Now the way it works is, if you drop into a fortress, there's a naval battle between the fleet and the guns of the fortress, and uh, in this case, the Portuguese didn't have a great, die roll, but it was enough to beat it, so they were able to land. And then a landed force gets, if it's against a siege and there is no combat or anything, gets 2 siege attempts, and that was enough for the Portuguese to capture it. They spent a step to reactivate it, so Corsica is out now. What's interesting, so with Corsica out, that is a province that will negatively affect French income, but it does not matter for victory purposes. So France is probably never going to get that back, but it will be, I think, an impact on their production. So good job, Portuguese. Elsewhere, the British decided, since they cannot directly help uh, their Dutch allies for the moment, they would try a different tactic, and they swooped in to Bordeaux. Now, here's the weird thing. If you go and look at the trade value chart, it shows that Bordeaux is a harbor. There is this harbor icon, and it points to, well, it's not super clear what it points to. This is a weird part of the map. So it seems like they're saying that, like, there's a harbor and it's here in Bordeaux. Like, there, you cut through the river, and it's really maybe like an estuary enough that, like, you can do naval stuff to Bordeaux because there's a harbor here, even though you could theoretically cross from this hex to this hex across the river, because it's like a river opening up into the ocean space with an estuary or something like that. I don't know if there's, like, if someone's got a good read on this, let me know. But because Bordeaux is listed as a harbor in the trade value chart, to me that means it's navally invadable. And the nice, robust army, the Peninsula Army under York, succeeded in landing here. They popped the depot down after the activation was over. So now this is the lifeline of the uh, British. The British supply line is to this port with a depot that can trace back home, and these guys, with York, they're done activating, but they had the multiple attempts to take the fortress, and they did take it. And Bordeaux is a key province. It's one of the 3 that could lead to France being conquered. So this definitely is a good move, and it's kind of the big, maybe the short midterm. Long term, it doesn't mean France is going to fall or anything, but it will mean, like, these guys might have to come down here and deal with the British, who have the river as their defense line. And they could continue to cause trouble and take Bayonne and kind of expand. So the southern department of France is once more under threat, just due to the British ability to appear and cause trouble due to their naval advantage. So they'll always sort of have that. So that's their activation. We go to the cup again, and we get Empire Land 2. And they can play on that, so we'll see what the French can do. I certainly think that there's going to be a need to come down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he certainly can do it, to try to contest what's down here. But this British stack is a pretty strong stack. Like, it's no joke. So not sure what's going to happen there. Alternatively, looking out and around, we could see some movement uh, in needing to take control of the outpasses against the coming Austrians, and then other activities here in the north. Um, who knows what? So it's going to be a little bit of a tricky activation. We'll see what happens. Okay, decided to play through the rest of the season here just because the chits were coming out quicker, and folks were kind of ending their activations. So we had a few maneuvers here with the additional British naval move and such, where the Army of Germany is now co-located with some of those smaller stacks that we used to liberate the Vendée. But the battle against the British to try to knock them out ended. There was a tie, and then in the second combat round, the French were defeated by a hair. Now, what I'm not sure about is when you fight the first round of combat, it's a minor battle, so you could have demoralization, but it's tied and you go again. Then the battle becomes a skirmish because there's fewer units. I'm going to assume you don't have a demoralization check because I don't know, maybe the battle was so hard fought that the guys don't feel bad about it. I don't know. Should if you lose the second round and the battle is of a different magnitude, should you be forced to take a demoralization check for the minor battle round that was a tie? I don't know. I guess not, because the rules don't say to do it that way. So we didn't actually lose the minor battle. We lost a skirmish after the minor battle. So I don't know. I don't know how you guys want to look at that, but it means that the French technically now have a stronger force than the British in this stack, but they couldn't move any longer. And the British are holding at Bordeaux as their main base of operations now. So kind of a tricky situation. Elsewhere, we see we're chasing Coley back to Piedmont. And then, further afield, we kind of ran into this really weird situation. So the French were here. They had been wanting to chase the Dutch around, and then the Dutch actually navigated around the army, avoided being intercepted, and took back Amsterdam. So, there could be a call for these British forces down here to loop back up and come back into Amsterdam. Now, the French are not out of supply or anything because they can trace to here and then trace all the way back. But basically, the Dutch are kind of doing what they can to be a little Fabian to keep the French busy while the rest of these Austrian armies move up. But that's it. So that is the end of spring 1794. We'll go ahead and start getting into the summer turn. And I might even be able to keep this video going. So maybe we'll try to fit more of 1794 in here, guys. I don't see any diplomacy mattering. I don't see any cards mattering right now. So we might be able to go right to the activations phase of summer 1794. So let's do that. All right, I'm probably going to run through the rest of this summer turn pretty quickly, because I think you guys are seeing enough of the game now that I can just run through and play. So maybe what I'll do is start picking through these chits and just quickly hitting things and moving on, just so we have a relatively an hour-long video, but one that contains enough of the gameplay for spring and summer 1794. So we'll pull the first chit, and the first chit is Empire Land 4. So we'll go and take care of that. Okay, guys, just to speed things up, I played through the summer turn, and let's just review what the end result was. So in the south, the French managed to push the British out of Bordeaux and restored it, and now has basically these guys out of supply. And then I want to say these guys should actually be considered captured. I'm not sure. how that really works. It might just mean that they're displaced, but uh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'll set these boats aside until I figure that out, but it'll be a quick thing. So these guys got pushed back, and they're just not really in a good position to do anything, so they've remained unactivated. In the east, the French are kind of paralyzed because Custine holds Toulon, but there is still a sizable Italian Austrian army slowly making its way across northern Italy. It is now the strongest stack on the board. Out here, we had a bunch of crazy movement. So a Austrian army got out to Reims as in supply, but had suffered some attrition over time. And then a different stack was kind of pushing down this way. So it's like there's your kill for France right there, potentially. But via some delayed movements and then activations to take action, Dijon was restored. Metz just got restored. The Austrians got pushed back or retreated back to here. And these guys are now going to be out of supply. The North Army is starting to come back down to try to do something here. So it's still a tight set of actions, and that's really it for summer. So we're going to get into the fall, and I think I'm just going to play through all the fall off camera and to show you guys the aftermath so that we continue to move through the game here. Okay, here we are at the end of autumn 1794, and man, it's interesting, and I don't know if it's meant to be so attritional or if I'm just overly aggressive, but we're wearing all of these forces just down to the nub, just the absolute nub every time. And so what we've seen happen this year or this season is the elimination of the British force in the south, getting pushed back and eliminated around here, with the French German army now wrapping all the way around to try to figure out what it can do against the Italian Austrian army, which is sieging Toulon but cannot complete it. The rest of these miners are just holding steady, but the Wormser stack in further north has ended up getting pushed back down to one step and is holding near getting supply off of Mons. And a coordinated set of movements by these remaining forces got in behind the uh, got in behind the Austrians who were here, such that they were like this stack of two steps couldn't be overrun by the Austrians retreating, and then uh, the force via Demurier, or I'm sorry, Hoke, um, did multiple interceptions, bouncing between the two Austrian forces, and ultimately going on the counterattack and trapping the Austrian forces within Zox. So we had French armies behind the Austrian army projecting Zox through here, and then the contact area of the moving army coming here, sandwiched the two Austrian army, or the Austrian army here. And when they lost the skirmish battle and could not retreat, that wiped out the stack. So there was definitely something where, like, if you have an appropriate force, which Hoke did, he had heavy cavalry and was basically able to fight a much bigger stack on the skirmish table because they were out of supply and the French modifiers were just good enough that they could do one step loss versus zero. And they did that a couple of times to where the Austrians just could not make way here and got eliminated. Now, you know, all these guys are like down to their last step or two, and it is an exhausting series of combats that has led to this. But the French still hold Holland, they still hold Flanders. It's just that like this Austrian force has a single step in it, and meanwhile in the south, the Italian army still has uh, 6 steps. So it's going to be difficult to understand, what can be done. And winter actually came early in this autumn turn. Like we only got 2 activations for each side, um, technically, or no, 1 activation for each side. So we drew winter quarters after the. No, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. If you don't count naval impulses, each side only got to activate once. And I don't know if that's better or not for the coalition. The coalition still has their winter campaign card, but going into this winter, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure they, what can they even play? What does it even make sense? Or can they save that card for a better occasion? I feel like the winter campaign card for the coalition is better played if they're going to be on the cusp of victory and they want to push France to the breaking point. But so far, France is just keeping the dream alive. So it's hard to figure out like what can be done. But let me go take care of the winter turn, and we'll see. Okay, here we are after the end of winter, 1794, and we saw a critical battle around Lyon where a Austrian army tried to attack Lyon. March to the sound of guns allowed. There's really 3 French armies, which is really like 3 French army markers and a couple of steps. 1 step each almost. The Austrians failed to march to the sound of guns, and the French ended up winning the battle. This forced the Austrian army to pull back. They had spread out to get good supply lines up on the west side of the Rhone River, and had a force that was trying to take Montpellier, but was actually failing all the siege rolls and the siege assaults. Um, and eventually we were able to get the army of Germany moved up, liberated Marseille, didn't have enough time to get to Toulon before winter quarters came up. Um, and yeah, again, all the forces are exhausted now. This gets into one of those weird war game things. Like, does all these eliminated steps, like dozens of steps, have been moved off the map, practically speaking, or pretty close to it? Maybe I'm over exaggerating, but does that mean that like hundreds of thousands of people have died? Well, I guess not, right? It just they are rendered. Um, well, maybe the Austrian army that got captured here counts, but basically, it is awfully bloody because I'm being so aggressive. Like I'm just fighting every chance I get because if you can tip the scale and force your enemy to be bowed out, then you can win. Now the French lost this year. I'd say most of the major. Well, they lost some battles, but they didn't lose them badly enough to get knocked out. And they were eventually able to, via very deft maneuvering and some lucky interception rolls, catch the Austrians in really bad situations. The British were doing well down here, but they just got attrited out before they could make a huge gain with Bordeaux. So Bordeaux was restored. The British, failed in their attempt, and well, that's as far as we're getting so far. So highly attritional. It's highly, highly attritional. I don't know how realistic it is to have like these armies just completely removed from the map this way, but it could be I'm just being super duper duper aggressive, and that's just factoring into things. Um, Super aggressive. So as it stands right now, let's see. Anything else? No one's demoralized. We end up getting down to the point where it's a lot of skirmish fighting with such low steps. What's going to be really awkward is we've got all these armies stacked together. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, and we're going to have to figure out how exactly to handle that. I think there's only going to be so many ways we can do it. It's going to be like, we reinforce armies over here with leaders, and like the armies separate from one another and go and pick up guys and move where they need to be. I can't just arbitrarily move the army marker, I don't think. So kind of weird. Like they had to aggregate to stop the battles in the south, um, but kind of a weird situation. Yeah, so conquest and peace phase. Well, technically, Holland is conquered. Um, so what does that look like? Conquest of minor powers 19.3.6. Okay. If its capital is occupied by in-supply enemy unit, um, and all of its fortresses have been captured, that's true for Holland. Um, if it is a one province minor country, Holland is a one province minor country. It's just Holland itself. Um, if it is adjacent to the conqueror's national territory or has no combat units, it can be annexed by the conqueror. Well, we can't annex Holland. Can't do that because it's not adjacent to the conqueror's national territory. Though, if we could conquer Flanders, independent of Austria, we would. But right now, we can't. So I don't know what to tell you there. Um, I'm trying to think. What does this mean? It means now it's going to be reinstated. Otherwise, it is automatically reinstated with 19.3.4. Starting with the conquest and peace phase of the current winter season, we can reinstate an annexed minor, or in this case, it's just being reinstated. Non-adjustments. The fortress of a reinstated minor are immediately reactivated if they had been previously inactive. Give this minor the status of a satellite. I'll have to look at that. So I think we can reinstate Holland as a French ally, but I'm trying to understand, like, what, is this us setting up the Batavian Republic? I'm not sure. You would think so. Okay, so it can't be a French satellite. This is interesting. Okay, so I guess this is what's going to have to happen, guys. Holland is reinstated as a French ally, and as best as I can tell, that's it right now. So the fortress automatically will be reactivated. Holland does not need to be garrisoned, though we'll probably leave some kind of defense there. And I believe the Holland force pool can be used by the French, so we can rebuild the Dutch units in Holland as French allies, as far as I can tell. If somebody's more familiar with the scenario and what happens to Holland when it's conquered, or I don't know, I guess again reinstated because technically we can't treat it as adjacent to France. You know, what does that do? What does that mean? I'm not super clear. I don't think that the Dutch minor should have the same leader as we were just fighting, like the army leader. So what does that mean? I don't know. So we'll have to decide on something there, guys. But we'll say that the Batavian Republic is being put into place, and that's what happens. Um, and okay, that I guess that's it. We can't make it a satellite. It is reinstated and as an ally, and yeah, so what we'll do is we'll take the Holland marker and we'll put it in France just to denote that. I don't want to use the box up there. I don't think it's as useful up there right now. So maybe I'll change that later when we're dealing with the Napoleonic era. But there you go. So France has made its gains up here. We still have to deal with the Hanoverians. They're just kind of isolated right now and can't do much on their own. But we do have that. We can start thinking about Geneva and Switzerland maybe at some point, but um, yeah, kind of tough to say. We're gonna have to see how this plays out. So there you go, guys. That's 1794. Maybe this is a longer video, but the fact that we kind of played through, I know for those who really like watching the detailed playthrough are missing out on some stuff, but there's just no way we'd get done if I was recording everything. So, so far, this year was another good year for the French. They lost some initial battles. They managed to hold steady. Again, used interior lines of supply to defeat Austrians in the field, and have managed to make some significant gains uh, out there in the northeast. The British try to use their naval capability to create a new front, and they did, but the French were able to address that. And in the next production phase, we're likely going to see, again, a lot of buildup on both sides, reflecting kind of the overall game situation. Um, but well, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tricky, guys. It's going to be tricky. Uh, anyway, we'll see you in the next one, guys. We'll look at 1795 in the next video. Anyways, take care. Keep gaming.